Welcome back, and we are now at part three of this week's new comics, bitches. So, again, let's get right back into it. Seems awfully orange on the screen. I don't know if that helped at all, but anyway, damn, there were a lot of good books this week. Okay, Super Dinosaur, number 7. As ever, Kirkman and Jason Howard give us a terrific issue filled with, this kind of childlike fascination, fun, intrigue, and a more mature sensibility to the moral quandary that Dr. Dynamo faces. Is that Max Maximus apparently knows where his wife is, the mother of his child, but won't tell. So what does Dr. Dynamo, I mean, how can someone get to this point where they're this close just to have it all go away again? And especially with someone, unfortunately, like Dr. Maximus, who is already kind of losing. It's not, there's no defined disease or anything like that. I believe that some of it was explained as far as his kind of memory loss is concerned, kind of his general mental state. But the fact that he's kind of losing certain periods of his life, that they're going away, there was decreased intelligence, so on and so forth. These are pretty difficult subjects to be dealing with, especially in a comic that essentially is for children. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be there. I'm just saying that this is kind of, it's kind of how I feel about certain cartoons that have come out within the past decade, such as Justice League Unlimited, dealt with some really very much more adult issues than many other cartoons ever have. And even Wolverine and the X-Men and kind of, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, they have a lot of, much darker subject material than you would find in your standard, kids' adventure cartoon. Which is why, it's like I hated all the, the kind of Spider-Man stuff that they had out in the 90s and the X-Men cartoon, the Fantastic Four and Iron Man and all that stuff. I kind of enjoyed them at the time because they had, a little bit of, it was nice to see cartoons, superhero cartoons on the rise again, back from when I was a kid. But, the only good one that you had out of that whole time frame was, was Batman the Animated Series, and of course Batman Beyond, but that came a little bit later. So, but anyway, I mean, essentially what we've got here with Super Dinosaur, all in all, this is to kids, this is to kids comics. Super Dinosaur is to kids comics as what Pixar films are to kids movies. It's, again, aiming for the smartest person in the audience, hoping that everything else can kind of dribble down and kids can still be entertained as much as the adults are. Obviously, Cars 2 is, I think we can just erase that from the oeuvre of Pixar animated films and, focus on, films coming up like Brave and Monster University and so on and so forth. But, the more original stuff they get, the better. But, this is a 4 out of 5, this read. It'd be absurd for me to talk about the plot, but it's just, this is really, really inventive and really smart and really fun kids comics. But with a little bit of, again, a little bit for maybe parents to talk with their kids about when they're reading it, so that, can understand how a good guy can maybe do a deal with a bad guy. Is there a greater good involved here? So, I mean, all of this stuff is, it creates for great comic book fodder one way or the other, whether it's for kids or whether it's for adults. So, and Kirkman is exceedingly good as a comic book writer, so I think we all know that. So moving on from one end of the spectrum to the other, so the Punisher, number 7. So we've got detectives Clemens and Bolt. They're basically going to the scene of the latest Punisher scene of the crime there, and the aftermath of last issue, because last issue was extraordinarily intense from an action standpoint and a suspense standpoint, and Clarence recalls Clemens, Clarence, but Ozzie Clemens recalls to Walter Bolt a time that there was this one individual who was being fought, a criminal who was being fought over by the Punisher and Daredevil. And basically, Daredevil, as usual, won the fight and gift-wrapped the criminal for the cops. Punisher split. And here becomes, the moral quandary that most of the cops in the Punisher universe find themselves in, is because you got half the, as Bolt says at one point, you got half the cops who are willing to look, you got half the cops that are just willing to look the other way, as for what Punisher does, and then you got another half of the force that actually really loves him for what he does. And from that standpoint, from a certain standpoint, you can see why that is. I mean, obviously, he's making the streets a little bit cleaner. He's trying to make them a little bit safer, but ultimately, this is all just serving his own agenda. And that's what Clemens understands, what Bolt doesn't. He doesn't really get that part of it yet. That the Punisher only serves the Punisher. The Punisher does what he feels is right, and everybody else be damned. Now, and then you got Clemens, continuing to show obviously some brilliant detective acumen. He's real police, as they would say on The Wire, which I've been totally obsessed with since I started watching it last month, and obviously, he's got the big reveal that he knows that Bolt has been feeding the Punisher information. So you've got this is more about I actually like the way that this book has been structured within these past 2 issues, because last issue you had was full-on action. You had Rachel and Frank tearing apart this syndicate, and now you have so you had the big action, now you have the big police. So, I mean, because Greg Rucka actually, coming from the, obviously, working with spy stuff like in Queen and Country, and with, I believe he worked on Checkmate for a while, but also doing a series like Gotham Central, in which we have this particular issue's artist, Michael Lark, who also worked with Rucka on Gotham Central, bringing to bear their full kind of, this narrative structure that's very unusual for a Punisher book. I mean, I'm certainly not dissing anybody's specific run on the Punisher, except for some of the stuff in like the the late 80s, early 90s, because some of that was real bad, and some of it was really good, like the Klaus Janson stuff and the Mike Zeck stuff, as far as the the Circle of Blood miniseries. That was pretty good. But again, and then of course Garth Ennis really made this character pop more than any other writer has done at any point ever. And Greg Rucka seems to be kind of latching on to Ennis's more realistic approach, putting it into a more kind of procedural drama, if you will. It has these bang moments of action, but then it also has this this procedural stuff that is also as interesting, and sometimes if not more so, than what the Punisher is actually doing. Because what the Punisher has said maybe about 6 sentences during these first 7 issues. So to actually be taking his voice out and just watching him has been almost, it's a really different take on the comic. It's really exciting to read. This is a 4.5 out of 5, and of course Michael Lark's artwork, it's so beautiful. I love his stuff. I just, I can't get enough of it. It's very appropriate for this issue because of, like I said, those ties between this and a comic like Gotham Central. What to talk about next? Okay, Red Lanterns. Let's just get this out of the way. Red Lanterns number 5. Now, in what absurdist fucking universe do 4 cops brutally beating a man to death in the street in front of a civilian who happens to be this perp's brother? In what universe does something like this happen? And not even, I'm not even talking about, I know that obviously police brutality goes on, there's no question about that. You have, Rodney King, people, that was being done in front of people and nobody did a thing. They filmed it. But, in this, the guy's just standing there looking, and the cops don't go up to him and say, if you fucking say anything about this, I'm gonna bludgeon you to death too, or something like that. Or at least, one of them says, wow, that was really stupid. And, it's just kind of setting up these police to be the bad guys because it's convenient. And I don't care for that at all. The more I think about it, the more I didn't like this issue. And this is one of those that is rapidly approaching my, a make or break point for me. Because obviously now you have that, you have this Earth issue, it's more or less resolved in the sense that, okay, now we know why we've been following these 2 characters. We knew that one or the other was going to be a Red Lantern at some point in time, but now we just know who. And now we know why. So and then we've got other questions on Yzmalt. Is Krona alive? And if so, how did that happen? And if not, which of the Red Lanterns is fucking with Atrocitus to make this look like that he is? Are they actually smarter? And that's, when he confronts Bleez and, some of the other characters. And there is some interesting character work. And Reese's art is eye-popping, as always. And man, Bleez is sexy. I don't care what you say. she's a sexy woman right there. But things are just taking some major steps backward plot-wise. Because, again, this is, it seems to be another one of those series like The Huntress, where it's like you got, here's a good issue, here's a not-so-good issue. Here's a good issue, here's a not-so-good issue. Here's a good issue, here's a not-so-good. It's just, it needs to have a certain level of consistency. And this is where, again, Peter Milligan's not a bad writer by any stretch of the imagination. And Ivan Reis is certainly not a bad artist. So it's like they just have to come together and they have to find a more structured narrative for this comic book to continue. And or at least to continue being interesting. This is one of those, I have really no idea how this is doing sales-wise. But, I know it's certainly not a top 10 comic, but it's, I don't think it's in the bottom either of the New 52. I'd be interested to find out what is at the bottom of the New 52, though. And I'm hoping it's not, and again, I'm afraid that it is some of the stuff that I really do like. I'm hoping that it's more some of the stuff that I really don't like Suicide, like Suicide Squad or, Red Hood and the Outlaws, which is just garbage, or Voodoo, or, Grifter, what have you. I don't care for any of those comics. I think they're terrible. But anyway, so okay, let's put it on hold here and let's pick it up with next one. And we've got some more really, really excellent comics to go through, and we'll get to our book of the week, hopefully. Okay, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Stop.